these sanctuaries of sanity are really, really crucial, aka communities. If you actually have real communities where real people are not chaining their moods to things that happen on Twitter. They're not writing social media moods. They're disconnected from that. They're actually just raising kids, training kids, building houses, feeding their families, milking their cows, and so on. That's how you do it.
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
Is this where we resolve that we're going to do this for another year?
I mean, I think every year...
Is this the meeting we're having?
I find out if I can get you onto the roller coaster, you don't get off until until a film project goes through.
I do see things through, Brian, by sheer cussedness.
No, I know. That's why I'm like, if I get you in the studio on January, whatever it is,
then we're doing it all 2025.
And they'll be like, why wouldn't we?
Yeah, let's go all in. We're going to build a big fancy set. Let's do it for a whole year.
Yeah.
Because this is the year of Ashtown, so I have to be fully engaged.
You heard it here first.
2025.
Year of Ashtown, 2025.
The year of the Ashtown burials.
Yeah. Last year we thought it was going to be 2024, but no, it's this year.
I didn't really think that last year.
We did. We thought it would be 2020 more.
2020 more?
You got to put an F in there, though. It's 2024, 2020 more.
More. Yeah, I was never deceived into thinking that.
Oh, but yeah, speaking of deception, one of our favorite things to do is to look back. This is my favorite thing. I don't think it's one of your favorite things. Look back on the previous year and find out what episode was the worst.
This is the year in review episode.
We got to jump to the most listened to episodes in our podcast world, which actually... on the podcast world, featured Nate's daughters on our very most one.
Yeah, go girls.
So getting rid of me, bringing in 2 daughters, talking about unsung heroes. That worked there. But on Canon Plus, the Trump Survives episode definitely was our top one. Real life comedy was when you were discussing the fact that no glory comes except through hardship and discussing the pain of your basketball season. I think people liked that.
Oh, I'm doing it again.
Yeah, and here we are.
Pain through suffering. And also, I was just talking to some of my son's friends who were visiting about the impossibility of tragedy without comedy. It's really rare. It does happen, but it's extremely rare to have truly sad scenes that don't include, peripheral humor somewhere.
Yeah.
Some weird, odd, misbehaving beats.
Yeah.
That are causing laughter at funerals and that kind of thing.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it does seem like just the decay of bodies itself. I think my wife read the book Cadaver or whatever it is. It's just about the decay of bodies. There's something very comedic about the way that we
fall apart.
We fall apart.
Yeah.
It's not just, we just don't die.
It's not funny to me, Brian. Yeah, it is. It's
just death.
We are small and we are petty.
Right.
And we decay.
That right
we
there.
Do. I can vouch for that. We do decay.
Hence the Red Bull.
Hence the Red Bull and the Tylenol for a podcast.
Yep. Canon Plus, they enjoyed Taylor Swift and the playlist trouble that we had.
So funny. I don't remember these.
That's great.
So I'm like, we had one about Taylor Swift?
Yeah. Music. What to do when people are listening
we did. I do. Okay. It's all coming back.
Right.
It's all coming back
like
to me now.
Like a great memory.
Like a great song. It's coming back. It's all coming back to me now.
And of course on YouTube, shout out to Doug Tenaple for being up there. Not quite as big as Tucker, but I'm pretty sure.
Good job, Doug.
In real life. And also Rory. Rory made a good appearance on
nice.
YouTube as well.
But clearly we need to just bring my daughters in more.
I think so. That was the main takeaway that I had at the bottom of our notes is if Nate's daughters do so well. We just started this year on the Ashtown Theory.
The year of Ashtown. Here we go.
Right.
They were just here. I should have brought them in.
No, I know we should have.
And I've been on them. They're busy, but I've been on them to start their own podcast. They have a long list of things they're going to talk about.
That's great.
So Cormac McCarthy, Jane Austen, et cetera. They've got all their
favorites,
their things,
and their hatreds. Yeah.
Yep. That they're working through together.
Well, sounds like they're well on their way. Okay, but for the rest of the episode, we're going to make Nate suffer because not January 6th, but January 5th was the Golden Globes. I'm going to make you give me
I am proud of myself for having paid almost zero attention.
Yeah, so now you can't say you paid zero attention. Just doing your best to ruin the start of your year.
Oh, Golden Globes.
Yeah, so chosen by 300 plus entertainment journalists for the Golden Globes as opposed to 19,000 or whatever voters for the academies. So two forms of not democracy, but aristocracy. Government by the elite.
Government by special people.
Yeah, maybe elite is too generous. Government by industry. I don't know, cogs.
Sycophants.
Yeah, sycophants. Okay, wow.
What's that called?
We'll bring in our Greek expert, Elliot. I think Elliot's our Greek
It's like
expert.
oligarchy and sycophants.
Yeah. Government by
know.
the worst, I think.
Sycogarchy.
Yeah.
Sycopharchy sounds worse.
Sycopharchy. Anyways, the Golden Globes, everyone's favorite sycopharchy. Yeah, I wanted to ask if you'd even heard of some of these and what your takes were. But
Okay, hit me. Let's go.
So top one, Brutalist with 7 awards, about a functioning heroin addict who emigrates from Hungary, and he's an architect, and he
Heard about it.
designs- Yeah,
Paid
terrible
no
things
mind.
happen.
Paid no mind other than I heard that it existed.
Much sexual abuse.
Heard
etc.
that it existed.
Yeah. It ends with the line, no matter what the others try and sell you, it is the destination, not the journey. I don't even know what that means. But it was put into the article as if it was meaningful.
It is the scab, not the wound.
It's the scar, not the scab. I think that's what
No,
it is.
it's the scab. You thought it was about the scar and the wound. No, the scab that fell off and you threw it away. That was the important thing.
Yeah. Plus, brutalist architecture is just awful. So
Yes.
making a movie about it
Yep.
being awful is accurate.
That's actually why it came to my attention.
Oh, okay.
Was just that. Like, oh, hey, Brutalist. Okay. Read a sentence and a half about it and been like, yeah, whatever.
Well, Adrian Brody, it was also in whatever Netflix's weird. See How They Run. Their fun little murder mystery that they did. That seemed more enjoyable than any of the heroin-soaked architecture of brutalism. But it did beat Dune Part 2 in all its categories. So,
Good. To have Dune Part 2 needed to come down a peg.
right. I mean, I think so.
It is not, in fact, the second coming
Yeah.
of the god of a planetary system. It is
It's just a movie.
It's
It's
just
just a movie.
it's just a movie with a really terrible female arc.
You can hear about that in previous episodes of SASF.
And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it,
Right.
but it still has a pretty terrible female arc.
Right. I saw an awesome picture of all those little guys flying across the sky, strung together like reindeer with antlers added for first Christmas, and I thought that was it.
Fantastic.
Okay, on to the next one. Second most award winning was unfortunately Emilia Perez, best musical comedy about a mobster boss who decides to become a woman and then goes home and lives with his family in disguise as a cousin until it all comes out at the end and they die in a car crash.
I'm for that.
So that's a musical comedy.
I'm 100% for it.
As you said, there is no comedy without death.
There's no death without comedy, no comedy without death. I mean, a mob boss goes into drag, goes trans, pretends to be a cousin, and then dies in a fireball. What's
Unfortunately,
not to like, Brian? I don't understand. Why
Well,
force this one?
it's all framed around this activist lawyer, apparently, who does something against her conscience to win a case, but through the course of this situation, helps this mobster.
You said
become-
musical.
Yeah.
I can't imagine anything better than all of that with show tunes.
I think it's also in Spanish.
Better and better. Even less accessible.
It
I
did,
should have warned people that this is sometimes referred to as sarcasm in a can.
you'll be pleased to hear it did beat Wicked though.
Hmm.
So there's something more mediocre than Wicked, which is
Again, you say that about Wicked. I don't know that it's mediocre. Maybe,
yeah, I don't either.
maybe it's amazing, Brian.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a huge disgrace that this
I
drag
refer everybody-
mobster musical thing upset Wicked. Maybe it's an outrage, one of the greatest outrages of Western civilization, actually.
That
Maybe.
Juan becomes
Not having
Emilia.
watched either, how could we say?
I just refer everybody back to your comments on sarcasm juice. That's where we are.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Then,
Sarcasm.
So, yeah. On to Shogun, which won 4 awards.
Yeah.
We've already talked about Shogun.
Yep. I like
probably,
it.
It probably deserved it.
I like it.
And then The Bear won 1 award.
Of course,
we talked about The Bear. And then, but I thought maybe we'd spend a little more time talking about Flow, Best Animated Picture. Did you watch any of that?
I have not seen it. I just know that, hey, the little guy won, and so I'm excited. And then maybe it's awful. I mean, it's just one of those things where I root for the underdog in that, and so that the fact that a $3.5 million little animated thing won is great.
Yeah,
it's great for people like you and me, Brian.
Totally.
But is it actually like? Is this also about somebody who's in drag and dies in a car crash? I don't really even know. I don't know anything about this movie. I don't know anything about it. So,
well, it was completely rendered in Blender. So open source complete, which is why it looks a little different than any of the other animated films that came out. It's about a bunch of animals on a raft, a cat, a secretary bird, capybara, lemur, just going on a bunch of adventures. It has no dialogue at all. So to me, yeah, hard to get me excited about it, but I guess in real life, I like cats and they don't have dialogue in real life. So.
You know what, Brian? That is an excellent point.
Anyways, yeah, beat Inside Out 2, Moana 2, Wild Robot.
Hurrah to all of that.
Right.
I mean,
it did beat Vengeance Most Foul, that Wallace and Gromit, which I did appreciate. I don't know if you watched the latest.
I did not.
Yeah. No, that was solid.
Okay.
The Return of
Well,
Penguin.
I guess we need to pay attention to Flow. I guess we need to give it a look.
If we care about I already forgot the word you made, but if we care about the 300.
Sycopharchy?
Sycopharchy, yeah. Sycopharchy advice.
I mean, aren't we required to?
I think so. Because here we are having a podcast about it.
Yeah, we're talking about it.
I forced you to do it.
I mean, I'm really curious if it is in fact good. I would assume that it's very well done.
Yeah.
In terms of animation and physical comedy, it's got to have a lot going for it in order to get through.
Lots of
or
danger.
Maybe it's the banana duct taped to the wall in the museum, and
the fact that it was made with open source software.
So we get gaslit, and people insist that this is wonderful.
Yeah,
that's happened before. So we'll see. I'll check it out. I'll actually try to come back more informed.
Yeah, that's good. And then finally, the only pitch that kind of sounded interesting was, I don't know, there's a horror movie called The Substance about basically an aging movie star creates with some substance, creates a younger version of herself to continue her fame. And then, of course, the older version and the younger version are bonded but fight each other over who will survive. And it had 21,000 liters of fake blood in it. So it ends in this giant sci-fi
This
explosion.
sounds wonderful.
It's Dorian Gray. I appreciate
it's Dorian Gray, but it's also like the
stole.
transhumanists and all the weirdness that's going on right now. I mean,
so you prefer that flavor would be left out of your viewing experience.
Well, I'm curious what it was trying to say. Yeah, it is Dorian Gray, but it's also what is actively being pushed by our oligarchs in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
And it is funny because as we sit right now and we don't pay any attention to our artists, our creative prophets, generationally speaking, we kind of careen into things. There's a lot of little warnings that show up along the way in different stories. And it's funny, especially right now, it's funny that we have paid no mind whatsoever. It's as if we saw a movie or read a novel about this box that belonged to Pandora, and somebody opened it and we're like, wait, we can open that box? We should go open that box. So every new video that comes out of robot agility, all-terrain robot, simultaneously as AI iterations are ramping up, as you see somebody demonstrating a chat-controlled sniper rifle. It's that kind of stuff paired with the robot dogs and the drones and everything else. And you think, oh, wait, I've read books about this before. I've seen this as the cold open of a movie. I'm pretty sure I've seen this excitement as you watch some bowl game in the college football playoff, and you see some guy in the shower startled as the curtain gets yanked back, and he's kind of like shivering in the water, and there's a robot staring at him holding a towel out. And then it says, the future's not scary. Like, invest with. It's like,
Right.
no, the future's terrifying.
That's
that was
really
terrifying.
scary. That's
That
really
was
scary.
terrifying. Same thing, like a one like flies in and delivers a burrito or a coffee or something to a woman and does the same exact thing. It's like, no, this is terrifying. I want to stockpile armor-piercing rounds, and I really want to start legal action that enables private citizens to own like EMP rifles, EMP guns. Like we need to be able to drop these things.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
mean, if
funny
you-
how much we fail to listen to our own warnings about anything ever. So it's not just that the American culture of the West has failed to listen to the warnings of their parents or of their grandparents, which they have, or of their God, which they have. We even fail to listen to our own unbelieving prophets. Our own unbelieving prophets have warned us about this, and we are still just careening in. And it's also funny that we have the demographic collapse, the population collapse, coming at the exact same time that we have these AI and robotics breakthroughs occurring. It really is a cocktail. It is just perfectly threaded.
I mean, as replacement of
It's-
a different sort.
It's wild. And while I'm thrilled to have a little window of time, courtesy of this last election, to hopefully get our feet under us and recover a little bit, it still feels like significant judgment incoming. I mean,
Yeah.
just significant judgment incoming with self-inflicted,
Yeah.
and we're careening towards it
Well, I don't know if
as
you
fast
followed,
as we can.
I don't know if you followed the excitement over the gravitic propulsion drones with the Trump fireworks out in the Tesla truck. And that
Yeah.
guy talking about how the US and China have the tech that he's used and they're the only ones. It's, we're at
Yeah.
conspiracy theory level. And of course, we try to follow Walter Kern's
Conspiracy
advice.
theory, sure, but mostly just people losing their minds.
Yeah.
And so insanity, pervasive cultural insanity, with the wheels coming off. So when you look at a true conspiracy, one of the biggest mistakes in conspiracy theories is the projection of intelligence and the assumption that something is not just madness.
Mhm.
Yes, there are conspiracy theories. There was somebody behind the Trump shooter. There was a conspiracy. Those things exist. But there's also just people losing their minds because they've been fueled with paranoia via media and also drugs. And they are losing it completely in a society that's fractured. They don't have a healthy place to root and be and exist.
Yeah.
And so they are, just a crazy dog that needs to.
And I mean, that guy had been, assuming he is still where he was, he'd been in so many theaters of combat,
Yeah.
destroying people with drones. Like that was his job.
Yeah.
And
And
that can't
are they telling
duplicate
us the
you.
truth about him? Probably not.
Yeah.
No. Do we know anything? Probably not.
Right.
But in terms of a conspiracy is trying to accomplish something.
Mhm.
A conspiracy is attempting to achieve a thing. It has a goal. And when it sells you this false narrative, when you're being handed a false narrative and there's a conspiracy behind it, there's some benefit to the conspiracy in you believing the false narrative. There's something they're achieving. Now that all assumes people are playing chess and they're seeking their own good, their power, money, whatever.
Mhm.
That does happen. But there's also just Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the
Yeah.
Looney Tunes like the guy. That is true. I mean Looney Tunes behind the guy. Where like, what are you accomplishing right here? What are you achieving?
Sure.
And the answer is, what are you talking about?
Right. Just
Outcomes are a whiteness construct.
Yeah.
I don't need to be trying to achieve anything in order to enjoy pulling screens and strings and just creating chaos.
Well, I mean, if you imagine lots of little splinter cells of FBI agents all working supposedly together,
Yeah.
that's the chaos you're talking about.
Yeah.
Where you ask any one of them, wait, why are you doing this? And it's like, well, I had this objective and this one stacked on this one. And
Yeah. So I've heard conspiracy theories around like the Las Vegas shooting, the concert shooting.
just that we know nothing about the guy. Yeah.
And I've heard from people they've had a lot of firsthand stuff. They've done a lot of close work. And they say, yeah, this was an op.
Mm.
There's a conspiracy. This was an awful, evil op. And I'm kind of like, why? And the answer there, I'm like, oh, okay. Well, they're like, yeah, they wanted to try to turn the red states against guns and like try to pivot. Like red America is so pro gun that it's impossible to work with. So what's one way to try to get Red America to start being anti-gun. It's like, well, let's shoot up a country concert. You know, it's like, let's go to these places where Red America exists and actually give them assault rifle tragedies so they can resent the guns and so on.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
But
because the election.
if that was the conspiracy, I can understand somebody having schemed something evil to try to affect a political outcome. Most conspiracy theories make zero sense.
Birds aren't real. That sort of conspiracy theory.
They make zero sense. There's no incentive for somebody.
Yeah.
There's no incentive anywhere. And now we're entering a phase where I don't think there need to be. People are nuts enough that, you know, they're losing their minds enough that they're not doing the old math. These are not Machiavellian. Like they're not just cold calculating for power and money. Those people exist, but God has struck us with madness.
Yeah.
Like with madness. And so, yeah, we have a bunch of perverts pushing the trans agenda. And yet we also have most of the people participating have lost their minds. They're not part of the conspiracy. They've lost their minds and they're self-mutilating and they're mutilating their own kids and they're participating in this mass hysteria because they're insane and because insanity has struck America. And so you see all these pockets of insanity and all these participants in evil who are not part of the conspiracy, meaning they're not coldly rational. They're not rational and they don't see an outcome that they're working for. There are people like that.
Yeah.
But most people are just nuts.
Well, I mean, to try to connect a reason to it, I've talked to a number of people that you'd think are normal people off the street, right? Former classmates who would just be like, oh, you know, in one sense, burn it down is enough of a justification for anything.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of crazy place to be in. It's like, well, nothing, you know, wiped out would be better.
So the
than what we
incentive
have
is somebody
here.
throwing a tantrum in the Walmart, kicking everything off the shelves.
Yeah.
What do you get out of this? Well, I get a very, very brief chemical reaction in my brain.
Yeah.
That's what I get. And I think we're there. I think we're there for a lot of the culture,
Yeah.
which is terrifying.
Right.
So I can play chess against conspirators who have some kind of outcome 2 or 3 moves away they're trying to achieve by means of these things. But when people are just burn it down,
Yeah.
you know, thrashing, kicking, you know, whatever, just looking to destroy, all they want to do is kick the sandcastle down. That's all they're trying to do is kick down all the sandcastles. And that's the only incentive. Doesn't take much conspiracy.
Sure. Right. It's just
You know,
a bunch of agents of chaos.
And so you have, agents of chaos, but you have people who are cowards who want to burn it down, but they don't themselves want to blow up. They don't themselves want to die. So
Right.
they are sending, you know, they're grooming and screwing up and sending people in like this to go throw the tantrum in Walmart, but they won't do it themselves because they're too cowardly. I think that that's happening a lot. And so when you have people who are still sane and they're trying to understand what the opposition is doing, and they're trying to read that 3 or 4 moves away achievement in, sometimes it's actually just, you're in the loony bin. Like this is where we are now.
America 2025.
So we're in this side of the mental hospital. They're in the other side of the mental hospital. And we're looking at them saying, but what are they trying to achieve? Why? You know, why are they just defiling the end of their hall? What are they trying to accomplish? And it can make us totally paranoid. Like we can end up buying in and going nuts ourselves because we're trying to project sanity where there is no sanity. And that is a dangerous game to play. So
how do you defeat insanity?
Well, don't obsess over it. Number one, like don't deep dive into it and try to make it make sense. If there is some rational, cold, calculated conspiracy behind it, you will not have access to it. Like you just won't. I won't.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I'm here in Idaho. I've got kids to care for and love. I've got a school to try to serve on the school board. Right. I've got things to do to try to like create a sanctuary of sanity.
Yeah.
And so these sanctuaries of sanity are really, really crucial, AKA communities. You know, if you actually have real communities where real people are not chaining their moods to things that happen on Twitter. They're not writing social media moods. They're disconnected from that. They're actually just raising kids, training kids, building houses, feeding their families, milking their cows, and so on. That's how you do it.
Yeah, nothing makes a Twitter storm real like going home.
Yeah.
You know, where you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on, I've got a 3-year-old.
It's like having glasses on where like augmented reality glasses where it's throwing storms at you all around. And you look around and there's a storm outside by your truck and there's a storm in the living room. There's storms everywhere. It's like, just take the glasses off. Throw them away. You don't need to filter your reality through this insanity, especially when stuff online is so easy to exponentially increase with AI and bots and so on, where it's so amplified. The insanity is disproportionately amplified in that artificial ecosystem, whether you're in Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, any of those places, it's artificially amplified. Take the glasses off, cool down, be real, be a real 3-dimensional human in space-time relating to other real 3-dimensional humans in space-time, and be grateful that we're given this moment, this election. But don't for a second think that we just fixed everything. Yeah. Like, we need revival. We need repentance. We need a lot of people to find Jesus. And the good news is a lot of people are. So it's happening. You know, there is a lot of revival occurring in different places, but that is the only cure. Like, the only cure for all this nutsness is a return to Christ and a repentance of all of our sin that led us into this insanity. So the insanity is not a thing that we will be judged for, although we will. It is the judgment. We are a proud people. We believe that Demos, we the people, are God.
And that we figured everything out. So
yeah, and we got smacked. We have been smacked. And so I think that's where we are. And the cure is to not try to solve it all yourself and to try to live faithfully as a character in the scenes in which you've been given, where you've been given those scenes.
So the answer is be leaven, right? 11 can't leaven the entire loaf all at once. But it's
you don't need to.
Just where you are.
So where you are, do not be an agent of infection and chaos. Where you are, you have to be the opposite.
Yeah. And parenting is obviously a theme of this podcast, but don't plug your own kids into the AI. Like, try to avoid plugging your own children into a system that would like to consume them.
Right. For my kids, social media was off limits until 18. And that was not really a point of consternation. Yeah. And I think it really rarely is these days. They're not yearning for it. My oldest son, 22, of course he's on social media. He follows news and things on Twitter. I have a daughter who's posting comics, on Instagram. My younger son, who's 18, has a basketball social media presence. It's not like it's the devil. Social media is not the devil, but it is alcohol. It is booze, and it is a mocker, and it can destroy you, and it can take over your life. And many, many husbands are too plugged in. They're just functionally drinking too much.
That's a good metaphor.
Way too much. And same with their wives. Their wives are day drinking all day, and he comes home from work where he's been hitting shots all day in all his breaks. And then he comes home and gets out the flask and is, hitting
distraction.
it. Yeah. It's like, check in on it. It's fine. Like, don't feel like it's the devil, but do feel like, just recognize its potency, and recognize its potency on your own mind, what it can do to your own mind and to your own focus and what your actual job is.
It is funny how effective a detox can be, where you're just like, oh, I don't need that.
Yeah.
That was, that's interesting.
So there was some British school did a test where they had a bunch of students lock up their phones for 3 weeks. And the thing that was interesting, the kids processed it. It was strange to watch some of the interviews with the kids who went through this, but the adults in their lives who were commenting on the children after 8 days, and just the eye contact, the presence, the ability to live their own lives in the present, fully present, and what actually occurred with the absence of phones. So I don't think we have a system set up yet that makes a ton of sense. When my kids got driver's licenses, they got phones. It's like we live in a world now where When I was young and I had a driver's license, my parents had an 800 number. So they had an 800 number, and then they had extensions for my sister's house, my grandparents, like their house. So I could call from any payphone anywhere. Communication was possible. That's just kind of gone now.
Right.
Like the infrastructure of the old phone system is gone. And so you have kids who are driving, they need a phone. Like, do you want them just flagging traffic down to borrow a cell phone from somebody else? It's like you need something. And so that's when we did phones, and then social media in adulthood. And, and we talk a lot about it and we work through it a lot, but it's something that it is kind of devouring. And so the insanity we see out in the world, which is everywhere, the accelerant, the fuel, and even the neural system that the poison runs through, that it attacks, is fundamentally social media. So all that spread, the hysteria, the LGBT stuff has spread via social media overwhelmingly. And that's
just that peer pressure.
Yeah. It's built and built and built.
Weaponized
And it's
peer
easy
pressure.
to falsify peer pressure in those platforms.
Right. So you can fake it. Well, here's
we saw this when people were mad at us, and some people they got all the anons shrieking at us, and they're all going to try to cancel. And there's just no perceptible impact. Like in the real world, there's zero perceptible impact on subscribers, sales. It's just, there's all this noise in one little coffee can, but it's not coming out into 3-dimensional time and space really well.
I think here's a question that follows up on that. If, we're in this situation, it's insane. We're supposed to double down on our lives here. Don't get sucked into what they're trying to get you to do. How do stories, and I think a lot of people think stories are frivolous.
Yeah.
How do stories and the idea of stories being soul food, how does that fit into this? You're living in an insane time. I think when people get desperate, oftentimes they turn away from stories. They either dive deep in, or they're totally like, all right, I don't have time for that. Like, there's gravitic propulsion drones out there.
I need to find out what the Rothschilds are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Where does story fit in your, if we're in chaos, where does a story fit in that?
It's like asking where lunch fits. I mean, do we have time for lunch? We still have to eat. We still have to sleep.
Yeah.
And the whole person needs to be nourished. The whole person needs to be fed. And the whole person needs to be fed in a way that is healthy. So what I was just describing with social media, that's all the consumption of story. That's all the consumption of narrative. We always have time for story. It's a question of which story are we consuming, told by whom and to what end, and what does it do to us? So if you found out that somebody's like, man, I'm really struggling to find time to eat a healthy meal. I can't fit it in. I really can't fit in eating. And so I'm lacking energy and, all these other things. And you're like, okay, so what are we doing? It's like, oh, you're consuming 6 cans of Cheese Whiz a day. Just into the cheek and moving on. And telling you,
They're just haggard.
And I don't have time for food. I don't have time for food. It's like, well, the first thing we need to do is remove that, create the vacuum, and then replace it with something healthy and wholesome. And so storytelling is constant. We are narrative creatures existing in a narrative, consuming the world around us via narratives. That's how we do it. It's our language. It's how God made us. It's how God made the world. That cannot be opted out of. So no one is capable of opting out of being a narrative character inside narrative scenes. And no one can opt out of curating their world around them and curating their own perception of their own narrative via narrative consumption. So they're all consuming stories. We are all consuming stories all the time. And we're all telling ourselves stories. Different communities have community stories, community narratives, families do. And it's either false or it's true. And it's true, it can still be delivered in a way that's unhealthy. It still can be delivered in a way that doesn't strengthen you, but it's just not false. So when we think about the fact that we are characters in a story and we want to navigate our scenes well, like we want to do that. How do we do that? Well, how do we learn how to do that? We learn how to do that from other characters in other stories.
Yeah.
That's how we figure it out. And so when you are telling your kids good stories, you are feeding them, giving them stronger bones as characters in their own stories. When you are consuming a ton of Cheese Whiz on Twitter all day, just regular Cheese Whiz
or
hits,
the Golden Globes that we read about this morning.
you are, if you're consuming all that, you are shaping your own imagination, and you're shaping your own alignments, and you're shaping how you then will live as a character in story. So we only engage. God made us to only engage via storytelling inside a story.
So you're saying if you're spending your time consuming stories about the scab and the wound, that, what are you, no wonder you feel emaciated and weak when you have to face in real life.
You're eating badly.
Yeah.
So when you have an intense period of time, sometimes we have to go without food for a minute. It's like, because you're putting out fires or whatever's going on. But it would be much better if you could actually be getting a really good diet with the right calories and the right protein, and everything's inputting really well. You would perform better in periods of intense effort.
Right.
You will perform better fed well.
So that's what you think we're in right now.
Yes.
We're in a period of intense effort.
Yeah.
And we had sure better be eating.
And so a lot of people are trying to navigate a complex time. They're trying to figure out how to live, where to live, what to do, how to exist as characters. And they're doing it on a diet of Cheese Whiz, constant hits of Cheese Whiz. And the gross thing is they're not just doing it on the Cheese Whiz that's like says it's Cheese Whiz. They're doing it on the black, infected, awful stuff too, like the tainted old Cheese Whiz from '86. They're taking the poison from their enemies too, and the algorithm's feeding them this because it makes them outraged and agitated. And then when they're agitated, they engage more, and the algorithms are trying to provoke more engagement. And so you're being controlled basically by your diet. And we're fueled by our diet. We're controlled by our diet. We are catechized by our diet for our choices as characters in our scenes. So when you find yourself in a scene, as we all do right now, how you live the next day, how you live the next scene will be affected by what you're consuming.
Yeah.
And you cannot say, I'm not going to consume stories. It's like, oh, really? None? Who are you? What are you doing? What are your goals for the day? Are you writing dialogue?
Yeah.
Are you writing any dialogue at all? No, I don't really write. Oh, so you just are silent. You say nothing. You don't speak to your wife. You don't speak to your kids.
Yeah, that's not true.
Every time you speak, you're writing dialogue. And if you were to say, I'm actually just not going to write any dialogue. Oh, you're giving everyone the silent treatment. That's not a character choice. Now we have a character who's refusing to speak, walking around in silence. That's a character.
Right.
You're a character in a day, in a scene. You're on the page. You can't help but be on the page. And so when people try to opt off, it's not that we say stories are soul food. Like, it's something that we want to advocate for.
Yeah.
This is the case. Like, honestly, I don't care what anybody thinks about it. This is just the case. It's the case.
We're not saying you have a choice to go down to the library or not.
Yeah.
Go down to the library and get a book off the shelf. Why don't you?
You have zero choice of whether or not to be a narrative character inside of a story. And you have zero choice of whether or not to make those narrative choices informed by your narrative consumption. You will make your choices as a character in a story informed by really like all your values, all your loves and hates, all your instincts will be trained by your narrative consumption. And then when you make those decisions as a dad and how to speak to your teenage son, as a driver and how to relate to other drivers, as a wife and how freaked out to be after spending too much time on Twitter. When you're making all of these choices, you're making choices of what scene to film today, what dialogue to write. And then you are filming that scene and you are writing that dialogue, and it is forever. And there are no edits and there are no do-overs. There's only tomorrow where you can try to do it again. So get yourself in narrative shape is what we're saying, but you can't opt out of being in a story, and you can't opt out of feeding your soul with stories. You can choose whether they're good or whether they're bad, whether they're fruitful or toxic. And that's what you get to choose. But you don't get to say, I've decided to be an abstraction.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not going to work out.
Like the drones, like the AI.
Yeah. Just it isn't going to work out at all. So
Well, that's a good place to end, especially for the start of the year.
I
Get
guess we're
yourself-
doing this for another year. We're going to build a great big set. We're going to party like it's Ashdown 2025.
Yeah.
And that's because it is.
First episode of the year.
Boom.
Narrative shape.
Some people prefer to be cremated instead of buried, but Granddad wanted to be buried.
You are dying. So am I. Every second I create more of my past, more decisions, more breathing, more love and more loathing. All of it slides by into the gone as I grab at more moments, at memories just made and already fading. We are all authors, creators of our pasts, authors of the books that will be our lives. When we race across the wet concrete of time without purpose, without laughter and love and sacrifice, then we fail in our mortal moments. See the past, see your life as the fruit of providence and thousands of personal narratives. What led to you? Lighthearted tales of neighborhood love, great tales of migrations, epic tales of global wars and comedies, dark stories about brothers and murder, tales of rape and grief and persecution. You did not choose where to set your feet in time. You choose where to set them next. Pause, breathe, eyes front. See the future. Do not stare into the fog of distant years. See the crystal choices as they race towards you in this sharp foreground we call now. The future flies at you in a never-ending storm of possibilities. God says create. God says live. Choose. Shape the past. Etch your lives in stone, and what you make will be forever. You are dying. So am I. We march from page to page, and it is our living that takes us toward the end. Children will follow, reading our stories, built on our stories, set in a place and in a time that we helped choose for them. They will be the ones to shut the book behind us. They will dig holes and arrange flowers. They will fill out forms. Cause of death, life. May it be the truth.
What's the point of the whole Bible?
Kill!